Advertising, manufactured urgency and human choice. An observation of manufactured urgency within contemporary advertising environments. This is an audio story written by Red Cardinal Kitchen Studio Company. The illumination of a dynamic archive. This record preserves an observation of commercial persuasion within modern environments of exchange. It does not condemn commerce, nor does it advocate abstention from participation in markets. Trade and promotion have long existed alongside human society. What is documented here is the structure through which urgency is constructed, attention is directed, and choice is shaped under conditions of accelerated information flow. The purpose of this record is preservation of mechanism, not resistance, endorsement, or instruction. Before the saturation of digital media, advertising traveled through slower channels. Printed notices, public signage, and spoken endorsement moved at the pace of distribution. Urgency existed, but it was bound by physical limits. Entry into this record begins in a landscape where exposure is continuous, repetition is automated, and persuasion is embedded within nearly every surface of communication. The subject is not the product itself, but the architecture surrounding its presentation. Advertising operates by linking a product or service to a perceived need, aspiration, or deficiency, forming an intentional connection that may be explicit or implied. Images, language, and timing are arranged to position the offering as a solution within a narrative of improvement, inviting the viewer to imagine transformation before evaluation begins. Manufactured urgency emerges when time is compressed artificially within this structure. Limited time offers, countdown indicators, seasonal framing, and scarcity messaging reduce the interval available for reflection, altering cognitive processing. When choice appears temporary, hesitation feels costly. Urgency does not necessarily reflect actual limitation. It reflects strategic framing of availability, where the perception of narrowing opportunity reshapes the tempo of decision-making. Repetition reinforces this effect by increasing familiarity across multiple platforms, where repeated visibility often generates perceived credibility. The human mind tends to interpret repetition as validation, even when it arises from automated distribution rather than consensus. Through frequency alone, a message can transition from unfamiliar to recognizable, reducing resistance as the product becomes integrated into mental landscape before conscious endorsement occurs. Visual composition contributes further to persuasive architecture. Lighting, color grading, camera angles, and background design create atmosphere before language is processed. Products are embedded within environments suggesting stability, attractiveness, efficiency, or belonging, inheriting emotional tone from their surroundings. In this transfer, context becomes silent argument. Language within advertising often shifts from description to implication, emphasizing outcomes, identity, or lifestyle alignment rather than features alone. Words such as essential, exclusive, or must-have compress complexity into declarative certainty, simplifying choice into binary form where nuance recedes as clarity is amplified for speed. Testimonials introduce a secondary layer of influence by simulating peer validation. Statements attributed to satisfied customers or recognizable figures create the appearance of collective endorsement, reducing the psychological burden of independent evaluation. When others appear to have chosen confidently, uncertainty diminishes, and the decision feels less solitary, even when testimonial selection is curated strategically. Digital environments intensify these mechanisms by personalizing exposure. Algorithms track behavior and adjust advertising placement according to inferred interest, creating the impression of relevance and strengthening perceived legitimacy. Personalization narrows distance between interest and exposure, making the message feel timely rather than intrusive. Manufactured urgency functions most effectively when combined with emotional resonance, connecting products to belonging, security, attractiveness, efficiency, or achievement. The purchase becomes symbolic rather than transactional, and in this symbolic framing, delay may feel like missed self-improvement. Urgency shifts from external timing to internal narrative. However, choice remains structurally human. Even under accelerated exposure, the capacity for pause persists. The interval between stimulus and action can be extended deliberately, reintroducing counterbalance to urgency. Verification, comparison, and independent review restore duration to the decision process. Time, once compressed, can be reclaimed. Research functions as a stabilizing mechanism within this environment. Independent analysis, user reviews across varied sources, and examination of specifications restore informational depth. While advertising simplifies to accelerate, research expands to evaluate. The individual navigating between them determines final outcome. Not all urgency is artificial. Certain goods are genuinely limited by supply, season, or production capacity. Distinguishing between authentic constraint and strategic scarcity requires attention to context. Manufactured urgency often relies on repeated countdown cycles or perpetual, final hours, messaging, whereas authentic limitation does not require continuous reset. The structure of modern advertising blurs the line between content and promotion. Influencer integration, sponsored segments, and embedded product placements distribute persuasion within entertainment and information streams. When promotional framing becomes indistinguishable from narrative flow, awareness becomes essential for clarity. The boundary between recommendation and advertisement requires discernment. Human cognition evolved within environments of slower exchange, and the acceleration of exposure challenges instinctive processing speeds. When stimuli multiply rapidly, evaluation fatigue may occur, creating fertile ground for urgency messaging. Speed reduces scrutiny, slowing reintroduces discrimination. Choice within saturated markets becomes negotiation between desire and verification. Advertising stimulates desire efficiently, while verification demands effort. The balance between these forces shapes purchasing outcomes. The individual retains agency, yet agency operates within influence-rich terrain. Manufactured urgency does not eliminate autonomy, it reshapes context. By compressing perceived time and amplifying perceived consensus, advertising narrows the window in which skepticism may arise. Recognizing this compression allows space to reopen, restoring interval. Economic systems rely upon visibility, and without promotion, products remain undiscovered. Advertising therefore performs a functional role within commerce. The phenomenon documented here concerns not the existence of promotion, but the intensity and structure of its presentation under contemporary technological conditions. Human adaptation increasingly includes comparative research, community discussion forums, and review aggregation platforms. These counterbalances operate alongside promotional messaging, creating dynamic interplay between persuasion and verification. The modern consumer navigates both streams simultaneously. Trust becomes distributed rather than singular, as individuals consult multiple voices before commitment. This distribution reduces vulnerability to singular framing, though it introduces complexity. Evaluation requires synthesis across varied perspectives. Manufactured urgency thrives in moments of fatigue, distraction, or emotional fluctuation. Decisions made under cognitive depletion may lean toward immediacy rather than deliberation, making situational awareness part of adaptive strategy within influence-saturated environments. Digital platforms amplify urgency through visual timers, stock indicators, and real-time purchase notifications, each reinforcing scarcity perception. Even when supply remains adequate, visual cues simulate competitive pressure. Perception shapes urgency more powerfully than inventory alone. Human choice ultimately remains negotiation between stimulus and reflection. Advertising introduces stimulus efficiently. Reflection requires intentional pause. The interplay between these forces defines the consumer experience within contemporary markets, where manufactured urgency and human choice coexist within continuous cycles of exposure and evaluation. The mechanisms documented here remain active and evolving. Advertising adjusts to new technologies and shifting behaviors, while human discernment continues to develop in response. No conclusion is drawn beyond observation of interplay between urgency and choice within contemporary commerce. Products will continue to be presented. Time will continue to be compressed strategically. Individuals will continue to decide. What persists is not conflict, but negotiation, between influence and intention. This record returns to the archive as structural observation. Some records exist to illuminate structure rather than to advise action. This record preserves the architecture of manufactured urgency within advertising and the persistence of human choice within its influence. It is held for continuity, not instruction. Thank you for visiting our channel and spending time with our work. Red Cardinal Kitchen Studio Company. The illumination of a dynamic archive.